On this episode, we talk about what makes a good coach, when to have fun versus when to be serious at practice, and sprinkling your coaching methods on your players. What's up, everybody? My name is Ray Sanders, and this is episode number 3 of Coach Knows Best. Topic today is very enjoyable. I want to jump straight into it. Caesar just got back from school. He's wearing a Real Madrid jersey. I'm not going to hold that against him. I just drank a Rockstar in an empty stomach. I'm ready to go. Let's rock and roll.
What makes a good coach?
So, there are a lot of different things that really make a coach good. Obviously, within this little show that we're trying to do, I can't really mention all of them. But I do want to categorize them into 3 things. This is probably something that you've never heard before, because people are going to talk a lot about like what their emphasis is as far as technical skill, tactical skill, all this different stuff. So I'm going to actually speak more to philosophy, ideology, methodology, that type of ideas as far as what makes a good coach. We can certainly talk about the X's and O's, so to speak. What I believe that make up a good coach is 3 different categories. I think that you could also, by the way, apply this in an abundance of different areas of life. This is going to be a little bit long of an answer. The 3 different areas of where I would categorize what makes a good coach would be 1, IQ, which obviously their general intelligence of the game. 2 would be EQ, which would be emotional intelligence. The emotional intelligence that a coach has and awareness that he has as it pertains to his players. And then 3 would be critical thinking, and or within that, I would say being able to diagnose problems. So the first is IQ. Obviously, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much of the other 2 categories that you have. If you don't have any IQ, if you don't even know how to coach, if you don't know how to teach a kid how to bend it, how to build out of the back, how to bend it like Beckham, how to build out of the back, how to switch the point of attack, how to pass a ball, how to shoot a ball, how to dribble a ball, etc., etc. If you don't know that information, then you're not going to be able to teach what it is that you don't know. So at the end of the day, you obviously have to have a high IQ. What you really want when you're really analyzing IQ, you also want to be able to analyze for your kid's coach how, or if you're a coach listening, are you dedicated to improving? Are you dedicated to increasing your overall IQ? Coaching education, certainly through the U.S. system, getting your higher licensing, but just in general, are you a student of the game? We have this thing in today's day and age, and it's called Google, and you can literally Google anything, and you can find information, IQ, that is like an extension of your brain. You can find information on nearly anything. So the resources that coaches have these days to continue to increase their IQ is like nothing else. Like not even 10 years ago did we have things like this, let alone prior to that. But what I see often as it pertains to the IQ issue is essentially people say, I've been coaching for 20 years. I did XYZ when I was a kid. I did ABC when I was a player. I did FGH as a coach. And at the end of the day, I don't need to learn anymore. I'm good. And I think that it's a poor attitude and your IQ is important. But IQ is actually something that's for certain coaches is valued too much. So what do I mean? EQ, I think, is extremely important, and I think it's probably one of the things that lacks the most. I think that it's something that, to be honest, I do a decent job at. A coach the co-founder of the Aztecs, Ricardo Gutierrez, he was tremendous at this aspect. The EQ, emotional intelligence. Do your players play harder for you? Are you able to extract the most out of them? Going to a practice and simply putting down a bunch of codes and having a bunch of good drills and then just leaving and having no type of relationship with your player is it's set up for failure. It'll take you to a certain point, but do your players feel like you always have their back? When I was a player, when I played, I had a coach that was a good mentor. He called me all the time. We talked all the time. He had a lot of one-on-one conversations. I felt that the guy believed in me. And his EQ, as it pertains to that, his emotional intelligence was great. Another way that I would categorize EQ would be having empathy. Are you really looking at it through the eyes? If you're a coach and you're listening, are you really looking at things through the eyes of the player? A player's 10 years old, 12 years old, 14 years old, 16 years old. You have to think almost like them and look at it through their eyes. Not meaning that you compromise anything if you obviously disagree with what it is that they're doing, but actually looking at it through their eyes. Do they feel like you believe in them? Do they feel like you ultimately have their back? And so on and so forth. And so one of the things, as an example, in the Marines or in some of these different military organizations, when people are willing to give their lives for their colleagues, for the other soldiers that they're with, when they're asked, why did you have such bravery? Why were you willing to do that? A lot of times what they'll say is that I did that for Bob because Bob would have been willing to do that for me. So they have each other's back, that EQ that they have. So when you're asking a player to do something, run through a wall for you, when you're asking a player to get wide, to switch the point of attack, do they feel like you have their back? One quick story is when we had a team that ended up leaving our club and I was coaching them, we ended up coaching them for the rest of the season. We didn't know if they were going to end up staying with the club or not. That coach attended all the games. He sat on the opposing team sideline. There was a confrontation in the game, and that coach, who used to coach for us, we fired him. He stood up and he starts yelling at the parents on the other team. The players told me, because they ended up leaving, the players that left, they ended up telling me that that was the day that they decided that they were going to go with him to the other club that he went to, because they felt like he had their back. Now, I would have done anything for those players, but they had that feeling like that coach had their back. So I just think that it's something that's lost. I think that that's not all that you need, but I think that that's something lost. And the last one really quick is critical thinking. Can you diagnose problems? I remember another time where I gave this coach a bunch of drills of different things that he could do, working on technical skill. He's working with little kids, and he's doing it for a while, for months. And then I went out and analyzed one of his practices, and the problem is that the drills were right, but person A was doing it a certain way and messing up in certain areas, and person B was messing up in different areas. So the problem with the coach was that day he wasn't able to diagnose the problems. He didn't have the critical thinking skills, so to speak, to be able to analyze and say, person A is doing it wrong this way, person B is doing it wrong this way. All that he ultimately thought was, let's put down the cones, do this drill, and the drill takes care of it. And the drill doesn't. The coach needs to be able to diagnose those problems and see what's breaking down. So again, when you look at all these things collectively, that's what it is that I think that compose a good coach. A, do you have the IQ to actually be able to teach them the content of what it is that they're supposed to do? B, do you have the emotional intelligence to understand that maybe this is a 14-year-old girl and her boyfriend just dumped her, and you got to have a little bit of empathy and understanding those moments and that player feeling like you have their back, so, and willing to run through a wall for you. And then third would ultimately obviously be critical thinking. Can you diagnose problems? Can you diagnose where it's breaking down? Within all of your IQ, can you diagnose where it's breaking down, where ultimately maybe at halftime you're analyzing something from the first half, the players, the position that they're playing, et cetera, et cetera. So that's it. That's what I think makes a good coach. So we just finished the last question, and Cesar ended up bringing up something about Jose Mourinho, something he heard. So go ahead and say it real quick.
So Jose Mourinho says that to be a good coach, you must know a lot about soccer. But just because you know a lot about soccer doesn't mean that you will ultimately be a good coach or a good leader.
Right. So, I mean, it goes back to what it was that we were just talking about. Why is it that a good soccer coach, or excuse me, a good soccer player who goes on and becomes a coach maybe doesn't succeed as a coach? Because they lack these other skills. The IQ will only take you so far. You have to be able to have critical thinking. You've got to be able to diagnose problems. You have to be able to relate to your players. You have to lead them. You have to extract the most out of them. And that will make a good coach.
My son's coach is always negative, and then my daughter's coach is always positive. Which is better?
Sweet. So I'll try to make this one a little bit quicker. I know that I ranted on the last one. So bottom line is this. First of all, if you're analyzing the aspects of negative and positive, I think that first thing that and your daughter's coach and son's coach, I think that you should analyze which one's getting better, which one's progressing, which one's the most effective. I think that you can probably analyze over time which one's the most effective. But it reminds me of this story, and this is why I actually chose this question. It reminds me of this, not story, but rather an article, what it is I read. This is like 8 years ago or so. And I want to say it was Yale or Harvard, but some Ivy League school basically did a study about athletes, and they used their track and field as an example, or they used their track and field as their guinea pigs. And what they did is they went out and had coaches coach in a manner of 5 different methods. So one coach said nothing, never gave any type of feedback whatsoever. He would do their drills, no feedback, no direction, etc. Another coach would say, when they would do the drills, he would say positive things, but then he would follow it by a negative thing. Another coach would say negative things followed by a positive thing. Another coach would say nothing but negative. No matter what they did, no matter how good it was, he always found something negative. Another coach would say nothing but positive. No matter how good or bad it was, he was always complimenting them. And then, because it was track and field, they were able to measure it a little bit better. I think they did it over the course of 2 years, if I remember correctly. But they said essentially what was the most effective ways of coaching. So after gathering up all of the data, the players that are increased the most, and least, I should say also, the least effective way of coaching within that was the coach that says nothing. No feedback, no direction, no nothing. The next least effective way of coaching was nothing but negative. Everything that came out of the coach's mouth was negative. The next effective way was nothing but positive. And then almost hand in hand was someone who said a negative followed by a positive, and then somebody who said a positive followed by a negative. And so those two were the best ways of coaching. The least effective was obviously saying nothing followed by saying nothing but negative. So when I've analyzed this over the years, I've had parents come to me and say, hey, I give you permission to yell at my kid. Don't worry about it. Yell at him all you want. And I'm like, well, thank you for your permission. But the idea behind yelling at kids and just screaming and pushing them in a way and belittling them for the sake of getting what it is that you want is just asinine to me. Doesn't make any sense. Like, I can make a donkey move if I continuously just whip him. But what is the point? This is not a competition amongst your friends at Starbucks or whatever it may be. We coach, and what you should be looking for from a coach is someone that is extracting the most out of your kid. We want to be effective coaches. We want to be able to actually teach your kid. We want them to have open ears. Now, I'm obviously very much guilty of being a little bit too negative and a little bit too harsh. But the best example of this is when I see coaches who will hold their kids accountable, and then the coach will say, well, I was right. What I said, that kid kicked it out of bounds. I yelled at that kid. They shouldn't have kicked it out of bounds. We've gone over that 1,000 times. And I would say to the coach, you are 100% right, and you should absolutely hold that kid accountable. The problem is when the ball went to the player, instead of going out of bounds, when they made that pass, you didn't say good job. And that's usually what's lost when it comes to this negative and positive argument. Yes, hold your players accountable, but do you say something positive? When the player plays the ball out of bounds, do you say something like, Bobby, that was the right idea to his feet next time? It's a positive followed by a negative or whatever. Or equally, when they play it to that player's feet and it makes it there, do you say, next time when you play that ball, it's got to be a little bit faster, but great job finding their feet? It has to coexist. And I don't think every single statement has to have both, but the overall idea doesn't have it. Are you threatening your players and saying, if you do X, I'm pulling you out? It's one of the worst things that you could ever do. Do you pull out a player after they just made a mistake and not give them any type of feedback whatsoever? One of the worst things that you can do. So do I think sitting around playing duck, duck, goose and telling them that everything that they do is good? Absolutely not. I do not believe that as well. But the effective coaches are able to sprinkle a little bit of positive and a little bit of negative in one lesson.
Does practice always have to be serious? What about having fun?
So actually, I got this question from one of the girls that I coach, because the other night we had a quote-unquote fun practice, and the team was split, and some of the girls started getting testy with each other, and they said, and I've always talked about there's a time to push on the gas and there's a time to just relax, and I wanted to have a relaxing practice. They're all playing high school soccer right now, so they're banged up. So the bottom line is this, I'll make it very, very quick. I think that there are certain times of the year where you should be pushing on the gas and it should be serious and intense, and there's other times of the year where it should be enjoyable. I think that sometimes I've gotten this question over the years from parents where they basically say the atmosphere is too intense, and to that I would say it's a little bit different. When I first started coaching, I remember a dad that was talking about this, and I'm new, like I'm young, and I just recently was done playing, and he was talking about how like, oh, it's just too intense and too this. I remember like thinking like I liked the intensity when I played. I loved soccer. I like the intensity. So I didn't look at it necessarily in terms of fun. Like to me, what was fun was competing at a high level, was winning a game 1-0 instead of winning a game 8-0, those types of aspects. But I do believe that you cannot go 100 miles per hour all year. And the parents that push or the coaches that push and expect 100 miles per hour all year, it's just not good. I think that there's a time to go 100 miles per hour. It's not time to go 120 miles per hour, so to speak, and really push and extract more out of them and more and more. And when they've done more, you extract even more. But I just think that there's other times of the year where they should be laughing and they should be having fun. And laughing and having fun and goofing off very periodically, but laughing and having fun at practice is not a bad thing. It makes the time when you go back to pushing actually a little bit more enjoyable. All right, so that's it. We're all done. We kind of flew through this a little bit. Hopefully it wasn't too long. Hopefully I didn't rant too much. Hopefully I didn't offend anybody to the extent, where you necessarily feel like I was calling you out specifically. At the end of the day, we're just trying to bring value to you. Give me any type of feedback you want, positive or negative, maybe a little positive, maybe a little negative in the comments, but truly any type of feedback you want, any questions that you want to ask, feel free to ask. Watch the whole entire video. Stop watching only partial amounts of it. You guys have been telling me that you guys watch only the first 7 minutes, or you're flipping through it. Totally cool, obviously, if it brought you value. But Caesar works so hard on this and on editing all these videos. So I'd really appreciate you guys watching the whole thing. Give us feedback. Until next time, I am Ray Sanders. If you have any questions, feel free to email me at ray7sanders@gmail.com. That's Ray7, Sanders like the Colonel, @imag.com. Thanks a lot and see you next time.